Hello, everyone. Our attendees are joining us. We're going to get started real shortly while everyone joins. Hello and welcome. I'm seeing our participants coming on in. Let's see who's here. Alicia, Daniel, Jane, John, Joseph, Lauren, Mark, Melanie, Patricia. We're going to have a big crowd today because we have a big star joining us. Jason Staats is here. I am Blake Oliver. I am your host of the Grow and Scale series brought to you by Financial Sense. And today we're talking about AI. And we've got the guy to talk to about AI, Jason Staats. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. I love how many Fireflies AI note takers are also joining in.
Yes.
Welcome, fellow robots.
And, we're not really sure if these names are real people either. They could be AI avatars.
Could be.
That's one of those great use cases for AI that I'm sure we'll talk about today is note-taking. I've tried apps in the past that did this to mixed, success.
Yeah,
but
same.
I think it's getting a lot better, like really fast, right?
Yep,
yeah.
For sure. As with a lot of this AI stuff, like it's not the first time you've seen it, but it seems to have made a big step change improvement.
Yeah, and I make a lot of podcasts, and one of the things that I'm using AI for every day is dropping transcripts of recordings in and asking for summaries and episode descriptions and learning objectives if we're going to make it into a CPE course. But I haven't really, seen a lot of applications of firms using it in daily life. And I think that's what our attendees are really excited to hear about. You've been on that, Jason, like testing AI, testing ChatGPT in the daily life of an accounting firm, a tax practice, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to hear the practical stuff now. Like we've been talking, high level about it for so long, but that doesn't make your email inbox any less of a dumpster fire. But I can see in chat here, we got a few actual humans. So that's good to see.
Hi, Maureen, you're a real person. Great to see you. Great to see you in the chat. Jesse says, I am a robot, as am I. David says, as am I. Bones and flesh, according to Romeo. Awesome. Well, let's kick things off then. I guess we already have, but I want to thank our organizer, our sponsor of this, Financial Sense. And I want to tell you about an event that they are having that you are also going to want to attend. If you enjoy this conversation, you are going to want to register for WorkflowCon, a first of its kind conference focused on streamlining and maximizing your accounting workflows so you can get work done. It's 100% virtual. You can register. The link is going to be in the chat there. It's October 25th and 24th, and it's all day. And Jason's going to be presenting.
It's me. I think we're talking ChatGPT. So yeah,
excellent.
If you enjoy yourself today, sign up.
Very nice. And don't forget, you can earn free CPE credit for attending today, but we don't do polls. We don't do live CPE. We do it as a self-study course on the Earmark app. So search the App Store or the Google Play Store for Earmark, download the app, find the Financial Sense channel next week, and you'll see the course on there. And we'll email you a follow-up if you're registered for this event with all the details. Okay. So Jason, I saw a story last week about ChatGPT and OpenAI. This one was very clickbaity. OpenAI might go bankrupt by the end of 2024. This analysis popped up in this like obscure Indian news publication and then got picked up and went all over Twitter. And I think there was no other OpenAI news for the week. And so this is a good way to kick off my first question, which is, is this hype? Are we nearing the end of perhaps a hype cycle for AI? This kind of leads into that direction, right? Like a lot of people have signed up for it. The user count is dropping off, apparently. That is what the analysis said. Their website visits are going down. So maybe we're at the end of that initial hype cycle. It's coming up on a year now. I know a lot of accountants have tried it, but probably most have not. What do you think?
Oh, It's kind of the $1 million question. I would say the hype cycle on ChatGPT we're coming down off of. So I think that was GPT daily active users. But what that doesn't capture is the other chat experiences that people are having now. I mean, think about the way chat has proliferated across so many things since ChatGPT's launch. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of Fireflies meeting recorders in here, and people will go chat with the transcripts from this session. So has the hype cycle ended on chat? I would say no. Maybe on ChatGPT a bit, because it is cooling off, but you've also got cool alternatives now like Claude, which is arguably at the same level as GPT-4 and free, and a bunch of other services like that. So I would say maybe on ChatGPT, but on AI in general, I think we are very much still peak excitement level, and TBD how much of that is hype versus how much, we actually get really meaningful stuff from.
Well, there are things we can do with it today. I mentioned I'm using it for content creation, but let's talk about how we can use it in our firm. Specifically, you've been exploring how to use it as a personal assistant in an accounting firm, streamlining tasks, routine tasks. I mean, recording meetings is one of those things. What else are you seeing it being used for in that regard?
Yeah, I kind of see it through two lenses. There's an element of the AI that our tech partners will enable for us. And so like the stuff that Financial Sense is shipping is a good example of how it's never been more important to ensure that you've hitched your wagon to the right tech partners to enable this for you. But there's also a whole other side of that reality is these tools ultimately we'll probably never touch, because there's so many fiddly, nuanced ways that we work with clients, from a specific need that a client has to this random email that you get that there's never going to be an automated solution for, right? So there's kind of an interesting personal productivity angle to all of this, where, yeah, every day, honestly, we're kind of stumbling into cool new use cases, from looking up a whole bunch of like ambiguous bookkeeping transactions to figure out, like, I have this merchant description, but I have no idea who it is. Like, it turns out it's really good at kind of doing that in batch. Writing emails. I think that's probably the most common use case, and rewriting emails. It's interesting. There's a subset of folks who I think it feels easier to kind of cover your eyes and say, well, I'll make use of it when, my tech people implement it into the tools I already use. I think if you totally do that, you miss out on some elements of how it can enable productivity for all the other fiddly stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and there's not much cost to trying it out other than your own time, and maybe $20 if you want to upgrade to ChatGPT Plus. And you mentioned Claude.ai. I'm a huge fan of that one. Yeah. That's free right now, as far as I know. Yep. And what's cool about Claude is you can just drop text, big chunks of text and PDFs into it, and it handles it really well. That was always my complaint about ChatGPT at the beginning was, I'm limited in how much I can get in there. But with Claude, you could drop in financial statements and have it do analysis.
Yeah, ChatGPT has, it's called a token limit. Basically, how much information can it handle at one time? And for ChatGPT, that's ballpark 5 written pages or so. The token limit for Claude is, what does it work out to? About 40x. So you could drop 50 pages of text in there, either copy and paste the text in or attach it as a file. And I can see into all that. So if you think about like a big piece of legislation, if you want to see if there's something specific in there, it's great for that sort of thing.
Yeah. My favorite example is when the SEC versus Ripple decision came out. I was able to take that PDF, drop that into Claude, and query Claude, ask questions about the decision, like why did the judge reason this way, and give me an executive summary, and it did really well, like surprisingly well, and it was so much faster for me than reading the entire document. It was 60 pages or something, right? So, if you're grappling with like what's kind of a compelling change for me and what's changed in the last couple of years,
It's the paradigm shift between finding and between that and querying. So if you use a meeting transcript as a really basic example, in the past, you could have transcripts, right? And, the quality of the transcripts have gotten way better in the last couple of years, and how good of a job it does recognizing the correct words. But the big shift is, rather than this kind of control F universe that we all live in, where you're doing text-based search and you have to get the word just right, and that's how you find things, what language models are now enabling is more of a semantic search, like a chat-based search. So in the example you just gave in the legislation, you may look for a very specific thing, but what if it doesn't word it quite the same way that you searched for it, right? Now, you can search by chatting more conceptually to get you to the same place. And a really basic example in the short term is we can do this today with meeting transcripts, with legislation, that sort of thing. Longer term, the really exciting stuff is doing this when it can see into your organizational email history, into the file contents of all of the files in your file system. We all know the pain of, oh, don't get me started on the pain of searching virtually, all the mainstream email clients right now, but to have a single search that can conceptually see into all of your organizational history and surface that stuff. Like, that's like a huge unlock that we're still like bit by bit kind of implementing across the different ways that we work.
Yeah. And that's what got me excited about the Microsoft investment in OpenAI is I mean, Microsoft has 90% of accounting firms, or 90% plus of accounting firms, and all your data is in a Microsoft database essentially. So, I mean, imagine just being able to ask this chatbot they're building, what is it? It's like a sidebar inside of Windows now, right? And you've been showing that, like, currently it's a little limited in what it can do, but I mean, it could go through all your emails and find that one piece of information you've been looking for, like summarize. I mean, the possibilities are really endless.
Yeah. So you end up in this situation where you've bolted chat to anything and everything, right? And that is kind of annoying in and of its own, is I don't want to go to 100 different places to chat with all this different stuff. But yeah, among them, now on the early build of Windows that you can like opt into, if you're feeling risky, they have Windows Copilot, which is a sidebar that's always on top alongside of Windows. Right now, it's basically the same as Bing Chat, but it can also see into your local system settings. But down the road, if that thing can see everything that's on your screen, think about a ChatGPT-like experience that can see and interact with the stuff on your screen. If you do tax in the US, you know just how much the tools we use can be a struggle. I'll just say that. And the idea of something, AI enabled, being able to automate the things that are on your screen is really exciting. But ultimately, like, how does that all kind of shuffle out? This is going to sound like a shill for financial sense, but for accountants, the more you can have that information in one place in a way that is searchable, so that I could chat down the road with all of that stuff, from meeting transcripts to files and all of that, like, that becomes really powerful for your accounting firm. If you think about all the information silos we have now, from my other colleagues' inboxes to maybe a meeting a colleague took, or a meeting that I took a year ago with a client that I don't even remember, but I've got a transcript for now, that gets super exciting. That's going to be really helpful for us.
We got a couple of questions come in. Feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A. That's the best place to put them. I will surface those for Jason. Here's one from Zach. Zach said, what do you find is the best meeting recording software that easily connects with your AI?
That's a good question. Microsoft is in the process of rolling out Teams Premium, which has some of these features. I don't know if it's available to everyone yet. And that's kind of the hard part of this discussion, is it's changing really fast. Fireflies.ai has definitely been a popular one. There's a bunch of note takers in this meeting from Fireflies. In my experience, the Firefly summaries are pretty meh, but what I actually like better than the summaries is the ability to chat with the transcript. Because when I'm coming to a transcript, it's usually like, did we ask them about that very specific thing? And that summary may not include it. Now, I will say right now, you end up with all these sort of siloed places where that information lives, right? So right now that would entail hopping out to Fireflies and querying, do we have this information? I would argue that's a whole lot better than not having that information at all, which is what most of us do with meetings. We're not capturing them at all. That's akin to like having an organizational email history where you just delete all the emails after you send them, right? Like meetings are a huge lost source of context. And I get like the spookies around that and why that is going to be uncomfortable for clients, but I definitely think there's ways to manage that conversation and set that expectation so that they can see how it's going to be beneficial for them. But yeah, problem today for sure is like, man, I just want all that stuff in one place and I want to be able to search across all that, right? And so yes, today, that stuff is siloed, but to be honest, like that's where our practice management systems down the road, I think, get really helpful in being able to centralize that stuff for us.
Yep. And we know Financial Sense is on the ball with this. There's 2 AI features I want to call out that you can use in Financial Sense. You can create checklist templates using AI. So you just describe the checklist you want to create, and then the various subtasks get created in that checklist. And then there's also the ability to create those email templates with AI. Jason, you mentioned email communication being a big part of productivity. So, you can just say how you want to respond and the email is drafted for you, and then you can review, edit, and send, and it's going directly through your email account, through Outlook, through Gmail, through their integration. And I feel like that is, if we had to pick one thing that is the most broad application of AI that you can use in your practice today, it's going to be that writing emails.
Yep. Unfortunately, we all went to school to do accounting, but we spend like, 2/3 of our time putting out the inbox fires.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge opportunity. It's already really useful for, especially around sticky emails that are hard to word the right way. I think they're really helpful.
Yes.
So that's where I find myself using it most is I'll take a first stab at something and it's like, nope, this is too mean. Can you rewrite this for me?
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's probably the most universally applicable use case right now.
Oh, great. It's great for giving feedback to employees. Like I tend to be way too direct in my communication, which comes off as, in an email, it's very impersonal. So like, yeah, smooth it out, right? I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can say, add some emojis for me, right? I don't know which ones to use. You figure it out. You can be very creative or make it more professional. I mean,
yeah.
Do you use any of those plugins?
Just don't be the write it like a pirate guy. Hopefully that'll just not us past us by the write it, as a haiku or something like that. Plugins, yes. So if you, and this is I will say one of the nice things about ChatGPT is if you're on their paid GPT Plus $20 a month thing, you get access to third-party plugins. There's over 800 plugins now, and you can think of this akin to like, your QuickBooks app ecosystem in the really early days. Man, this is like a wild west of all sorts of weird stuff. Some of it works, some of it's totally busted, but there's some pretty cool stuff in there for accountants already. Stuff like, the big knock a lot of people put on kind of the GPT models is, well, it was only trained on data through September 2011. But if you enable a browsing plugin, it'll actually marry the way it would normally respond with the top web search results, current web search results, and kind of homogenize that into a single response, seemingly bridging the gap from that end of that training data and today. So like, just really practical example, if I need to dig through an IRS publication for something, I can just give it the URL and say like, help me summarize the answer to this question according to this URL or these 10 URLs and these 5 PDFs. Stuff like loan calculators. I don't know, what else is there? What plugins are you using?
I haven't used too many plugins. I was a big fan of the search plugin, the Bing search plugin, until that got disabled for, I guess, copyright reasons. It was bypassing paywalls on news sites.
That got disabled, but Web Pilot basically gets you to the same place. That's a third-party plugin that'll do even a little more because it'll work with PDF files.
Okay.
So that's what I've been using for browsing.
If you're a fan of Microsoft Edge, you can use Bing search inside of Microsoft Edge, and that searches the web in a chat GPT kind of way. And what I love about that is you get the footnotes, essentially. It cites all of its sources, and you can click through and make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah, and a big part of this is what user experience makes the most sense for accountants. We had that case where an attorney had basically written something up and used GPT, and it had like hallucinated some other court case citations. Yeah. And everybody's like, I told you this was going to happen. And it's like, okay, at the end of the day, if you're using AI, you are still 100% accountable for the output. So what I actually want from AI is not for AI to give me an answer, but for AI to give me all of the information in the most seamless way possible from which I can kind of make my own conclusion. So for the way we use these tools, long-term, it's got to be a top citations. Like it's got to be, here's the answer, but it's because of this excerpt, and this excerpt from these authoritative, sets of documentation, which is different than like the normie non-accountant user who's using it akin to Googling and just wants the answer, but that is where I think more domain-specific AI tools are going to be better suited for giving us, like, serving up that information in the format that we need it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be amazing if and when the tax research tools integrate this type of interface with all of the body of knowledge that they have. But the question is when, right?
Yeah. And will it be the incumbent folks or will it be new providers? Right. But boy, I can harken back to some real sweaty afternoons in my early tax preparer days. Just like those tools are so hard to use. And oftentimes you just fall back to Google because you're so confused. But the problem is it was text-based search. So I would search for something and it would give me the 10 things that are most relevant to it. But it didn't tell me why those things were relevant to it or what the answer was according to that source. Whereas an AI-enabled version of the same thing, if I'm going to search are there any exceptions to the exclusive business use rules around office and home deductions? There's so many issues with that query. Like it's called business use of home, not office and home, even though that's what we call it. But with an AI-enabled search, it can pull the most relevant documents and semantically tell you what those documents have to say on those subjects, rather than just giving you a search box of a bunch of results, which is what it does now. And we really get into the nitty-gritty of tax research. Oftentimes you get different answers from different source documentation. So yes, the process of developing research and putting together the work paper and stuff like that, I think is going to be vastly improved.
So let's go down the list of possibilities for AI and talk about tools that are there today that people can use, or maybe there isn't one, there's an opportunity here. What about data entry, data categorization, coding, bank feed kind of stuff? Is there anything that you recommend people look at that's available now?
Yeah, so the thing to consider generally with something like that is, unless it impacts the way I work with my ledger, then I'm probably not going to use it. So this is an area where I'm hoping we'll see improvements from the major ledger platforms. The biggest unlock I've had personally, we touched on earlier, is the ability to look up merchant descriptions and not have to Google all those things one by one. So you get to the end of doing a month-end close and there's 12 transactions there that are like, I got no idea what this merchant description is. Language models are really good at going out and finding that information for you. So I like to build a little prompt that'll return a table that is, here's who I think it is, here's my level of confidence, here's a link to their website, and here's like a 6-word summary of what they do. And honestly, being able to copy those merchant descriptions in, which are the same for everybody, this is not sensitive information. I paste those in, it gives me a little table, it saves me having to Google all those things one by one. I do think there's a gap here where there's a lot of micro businesses that basically have once a year bookkeeping cleanup, where there's probably a more automated solution out there than giving their info to their tax preparer to prepare a tax return, and then they key it all into a QuickBooks file or something at the end of the year. There's still a lot of that happens. So there's definitely opportunities for new AI-enabled solutions in the space. Another thing that kind of blew my mind with GPT specifically is it's really good at pulling structured transaction files from a bank statement. So it's an elegant solution to a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place. But if you find yourself in a situation where all you have is the statements and not like a transaction download file, if you copy paste the transaction section from a bank statement, the only situation where you may run into some issues with sensitive information is some of the old banks on like account transfers may show an account number. So obviously be mindful of what you are pasting in, but it will return for you a CSV download with dates and descriptions and amounts. And man, if I had $1 for every hour I spent as a junior keying stuff in, 12 months credit card statements and stuff like that over the course of tax prep, hopefully you don't find yourself in that situation that much where all you've got is the statement. But it's kind of an example of like that personal productivity assistant where you're like, I'm in this dumb situation. And how many times does this happen where you end up just blowing an afternoon that you hadn't planned, where maybe there's a way that it can be a resource for you?
Oh, I know very well what you're talking about. I mean, that was I started out as a bookkeeper. That was my job, was keying transactions into QuickBooks.
That was like all you did was keying the stuff in?
That was it for hours and hours. I listen to my music, I get into a flow.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. But now you can just copy paste into ChatGPT and it can do it. But that does bring up a question. You mentioned the security implications of account numbers. I performed an experiment the other day where I took a set of financial statements from Xero and I copy pasted from the PDF into Claude AI and I asked it to do some financial statement analysis for me. Did a great job. But there's the client name is on those financial statements. That's now in Claude AI, right? So what are the security concerns around this? I know a lot of firms have said, don't use it until we figure it out. A lot of big businesses too have done that. What's your feeling on the security? Is it something we got to be paranoid about? Or are people being too paranoid about it? What do we do?
A lot of the due diligence is the same as you would have with any of the other cloud apps that you use. So you need to understand, is it possible to get all of my data off their servers if I'm going to go to another service? Like, can we wipe all that stuff out? Like, what is the retention policy of any data that I put into the system? And the mainstream models, like I think people talk about OpenAI like it's like a fly-by-night operation. Like this is one of the biggest companies in the world now. It's SOC 2 compliant. Like what you just have to understand is with any language models, the only real difference is you need to understand when your prompts are trained into the model and when they are not. So right now, that's a setting in ChatGPT. If you enable the privacy setting, it will not train your prompts into the model. For services like, say, Financial Sense, who may use GPT for part of their AI functionality, anything that goes to GPT via their API, that is like they've written code to get that stuff on an automated basis, none of those things are trained into the model. Claude, on the other hand, prompts are trained into the model. So you got to do some due diligence to understand what's going into the model and what isn't. They say anything that is trained into the model is anonymized. And it's also worth zooming out and just acknowledging that under GDPR, under California's privacy rules, under HIPAA even, if information is anonymized, that is, it is not able to be tied back to a specific person, it's generally not considered sensitive information. So in the example you just gave of putting financial statements in there, generally, if you're going to put a set of financial statements in there, it's simply a matter of not putting the company's name in there or anything that's identifiable. Now, does that mean it's a good idea to do in scenarios where it's trained into the model? That's probably a firm by firm decision where what you're going to need to do is create a policy document so that your team understands the right ways and the wrong ways to use it. But through a combination of anonymization, through not using models in the contexts where the prompts are trained into the model, between those two things, there really should be no scenario where client information is getting trained into a model. And it's a whole other conversation, actually, whether training data into a model is even problematic because it is anonymized and all of that. But just to be on the super conservative end of the spectrum, only use it in contexts where it's not going to be trained into the model, and anonymize. And in that scenario, like, you really shouldn't have any problems.
So, example, I get an email from a client with a tax question. It's one I've answered before, but I don't have a response handy, and I'm comfortable I could do it, but I just want to automate this. So I take their question, I drop it into ChatGPT, and I say, help me answer this client question. And it spits out the response. I didn't put the client's name in there. I didn't put there's no identifiable information in there. I'm okay, generally okay to use that.
Yeah, because it's not tying it back to any specific people, even if you turn on the privacy settings, so it's not trained into the model. I don't know. This is where you probably have to make a firm policy decision. But
there's a disclaimer here. This is not professional advice or legal advice. Make your own decision. Consult your attorney. Consult your lawyer.
Yep. Work with your IT group on a policy doc. There's a lot of spooky scaries around the newness of this, much like we saw around the cloud transition. All of this stuff, unless you are using like fly-by-night models, which frankly, I don't know that, most people are just going to ChatGPT at this point. All of this stuff is known. Now, there is ambiguity around understanding what these models are capable of and what new things we can prompt them to do. But our understanding of what is retained in the model, like, that is concrete. Like, that, there is no confusion around that. So the talking point of we're going to wait until we understand how it uses our data, that's all perfectly well understood. It doesn't mean it doesn't take a little bit of work to get to the bottom of it and build that policy document. But for me, like, they talk about students, cheating on their homework and stuff like that with ChatGPT. I think laziness is like the kind of catalyst for innovation oftentimes. And I want to put all the tools in my team's hands possible to make them more productive. So I would really encourage people to, and maybe going to your IT provider is a good place to start. Work on that policy doc if you don't have it already, so that you can enable as much as you can responsibly. Because there's definitely wrong ways to do this, but that doesn't mean that there aren't totally fine ways to do it.
I'm glad you brought up the kids cheating on their homework with AI, because this reminds me, not that I read this article when it came out in 1986, but math teachers staged a calculated protest in 1986 about whether or not students should be allowed to use calculators in school. 6,000 math teachers. And now we're all using calculators all day long, right? And the argument back then was, well, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. Well, we do, right? Yeah, I feel like in a short amount of time, or a matter of years, we're all going to be using AI to draft almost everything we write to some extent. And you already see it there with like the autocomplete on your phone. Certain texting apps, Gmail does it. I don't know if Outlook does that yet, but you can just press a button, send a response, right?
Yeah, so there's a very real element of grappling with, what does it mean if we don't have to do this anymore? And does this devalue this thing? Like, I don't know about you, they still taught us to write cursive in third grade.
They're learning that still. My son is just starting third grade, and he will be learning cursive.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not to say there isn't any value in learning how to do those things, but we're always sort of on this treadmill of like, what's relevant is constantly evolving. And the completely reasonable reaction to have to that is, how is some kid ever going to understand to do XYZ if they don't understand the foundational thing, like whether that's T accounts or how to fill out a tax return by hand or something like that? And oftentimes you can look at those questions like very practically and be like, I don't know, but like it sure seems we're going that way. I just like the analogy I like to make is like, however long ago it was according to evolution, 6 million years ago or something like that, when the first little bacteria like crawled out of the ocean up onto land, and all the ones who are still swimming were saying, yeah, but what if we forget how to swim? Like, I just don't want to be that guy who like, when you look backwards, it's like, okay, no, maybe we actually didn't know how to need to know how to do that thing. And that held us back from this better thing, maybe. So there are a lot of situations like that where I genuinely don't know what that looks like if they no longer have to do that underlying skill. Well, but should that keep me from leaning into the next thing? Probably not.
You still have to know how to do it, because you have to be able to evaluate the output of that AI. And if you don't know how to write a sentence or write a paragraph or do debits and do a journal entry, right? If you don't know your debits and credits, how are you going to be able to know if the AI did it right? So
I wouldn't even know that I would say that like I 100% agree with that. If you think about like, I never knew how to prepare a tax return by hand. Like I came of age when we had software to do it. And so I didn't know how to do that. Another great example, if you work with offshore team members for whom English is not their primary language, you better believe they are using ChatGPT right now, not only to better comprehend the communications that they get, but to write more clear responses. And there does have to be like a fundamental level of understanding exactly what you are telling them for them to like be able to action on that information that you gave them. But I tell you what, like it's changing what all of that looks like and what it even means. And it can be easy to get stuck on that, but oftentimes, maybe the better question is, doesn't matter. Like ultimately, does that? There are certain things that honestly are like sacred, and as humans, we should try to hang on to because they are important culturally and stuff like that. But then there's other things that are like, yeah, boy, what if I never do have to write an email totally from scratch again? Like, is that something that I'm going to miss? Probably not.
Well, and are we going to get to the point where our virtual assistants, our AI virtual voice assistants, because this is going to become a voice thing eventually with Siri and whatever Google has. I'm just going to say, I don't want to say it right now. I want to say it right now because I don't want to set it off, but I'm just going to ask AI to go book a meeting book my next interview with Jason. Yep. And then my AI will go off and talk to your AI and coordinate the calendar appointments. And, you'll have a little conversation with your AI, and all those emails back and forth that we used to have will be gone.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen, people that still don't like Calendly, right? Scheduling apps. People that have pushed back on, well, it misses out on the nuance of this and that. But most people lean into that. Yeah, I don't know. Changing times. There's definitely going to be little things in there that do matter that we should still hang on to. But hopefully there's more things that we can like happily leave behind.
Hopefully more time for this kind of thing. This, face to face.
Yeah. Is this face to face, Blake?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. Is this Jason's AI avatar talking to me right now, or is this Jason himself? Because I actually saw some of that on Twitter this week. There's a company, I forget what it's called, but the CEO posted a video of himself that's completely AI generated. And at first, I thought it was a side by side, that one was AI and one was him. But then I read more closely. I found out they're both AI, and that's an interesting, scary place. Just from like a fraud perspective, like how do you know that who you're talking to on the phone is real when the voice could be AI generated? And there was just a study that said like people can only detect it 70% of the time now, or something like that. It's getting really scary good. So I don't know, maybe from just like a standpoint of protecting our clients and protecting the companies we're responsible for, and we've all got to some extent access to client funds and the ability to transfer money around. Like, how do we keep ourselves safe?
Yeah, I mean, what do people say when folks learn how to, mimic other people's handwriting?
And yet we still use signature cards at banks. So
yeah, It's just, I mean, it's going to continue to evolve, and like the best practices will continue to change. And there's going to be a lot of things that, like everything else, accountants have to learn and get good at to enable, their SMB clients, because that's just who the universe seems to pin this stuff on, as accountants for some reason. Not the worst place to be in, but yeah, the whole likeness stuff, like you can go down a whole sci-fi rabbit hole on this, but just like 60 seconds, what I think is fascinating. Have you ever seen those, like you have like pictures of your ancestors and they can animate them to talk and stuff like that? And they're like, oh, wow, that's really novel. It's like my great grandpa, back to life talking, whatever. That is the last generation for whom we will not be able to make a true to life replica of. So you and I, Blake, there's enough video and audio data of both of us on the internet to where our great grandchildren will be able to have fully live conversations with us, and they will look no different to you and I sitting in these chairs right now.
We have become immortal, Jason.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, so like where this impacts professional services is how documented is your expertise?
Mm-hmm.
Because where we're headed is, if you think about chatbots right now, that's a less sci-fi example that's maybe easier to come to terms with than, an actual visual avatar talking to somebody. But if you just think about a chatbot, if all the emails you ever sent to your clients were trained into an AI model, and your clients could then message with that chatbot to get advice 24/7, it's not as good as the real deal, but it's a whole lot better than just reading your blogs, right? You have this avatar of your expertise that is a snapshot of everything about you that has been documented. That's valuable. If I'm going to benchmark firm A against firm B, and firm B has a chatbot that I can talk with 24/7, that's not a replacement for one-on-one with the advisor, but we'll answer some basic questions. That's pretty cool. So the way this impacts professional services, I think, honestly, in the fairly near term, is how is your expertise captured in a way that people will be able to draw value from it? Because a very well-documented professional could stand something like that up, but somebody who's maybe not quite as well documented, they haven't put the work into creating that content or capturing their thoughts on more things, they're going to be at a disadvantage there, I think.
And you can do that now. I think you've been showcasing tools that will let you create a little wiki that the AI can query. It's like your own little LLM database.
There's absolutely ways right now where in about 5 minutes, you can stand up a chat bot that will only chat about the context that you give it. And that's a really big distinction. ChatGPT is its general knowledge, but it will fill in the blanks and hallucinate the things it doesn't know. Models are good enough now to where they will only ever discuss with the user stuff that you give it context for. So it's really only regurgitating the things that you've already said. But if they ask it how to make ice cream, it's going to say, I don't know how to make ice cream. So I run a daily podcast. I can connect all of the transcripts of all of my daily podcasts for 100 episodes to a chatbot. Somebody can sit down and honestly have a fairly realistic conversation with me built to top all those transcripts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this has implications, beyond just content creators. You as a firm owner, you can create videos for your firm, put these into that database, and then it's like your employees can query you. They can chat with you, and you don't have to be there to answer the easy questions.
Yeah. So what keeps giant tax corp from creating the ultimate, expert with billions and billions of, Q&As and something that I could never match? The answer is specificity. So solving more specific problems for a more specific type of client. The same way ChatGPT has this general knowledge level that is right here, but you are up here, that will keep getting better. But ultimately, how we've always protected ourselves from productization and software tools, automating things, is just greater specificity in the problems that we solve and the people we work with.
Yeah. And this is an add-on to what you're already doing. It's not a replacement. You can say, you're a client of my firm, and you not only get access to me in person for real, but hey, when I'm not available, you can chat with me on demand, and you've got access to my brain in that sense.
I think if you took the most common 50 questions that we all get, that's probably half of support inquiries.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to know what the breakdown is. I bet there's a super long tail, right? Most of them are probably the same questions over and over.
Yeah.
So we had some chat come in. Rich said, if kids texted in normal sentences, I would say they have great writing skills, but they don't. So writing a business letter will be hard for them. I have to say, I'm not very good at texting in normal sentences either, though, in their defense. Andrew said, Blue Jay has a tax research tool that uses AI called Ask Blue Jay. That's one to check out. Hey, Jason, what about like advisory services, budgeting, forecasting, CFO type services? Have you seen any cool AI tools enter the market in that respect?
I've seen a little bit of stuff around kind of generative insights. So kind of mainly around trends, calling out trends, that sort of thing. In fact, I don't know, it was maybe a couple months ago in my newsletter, I shared a prompt for Code Interpreter, which is another model under ChatGPT, where you uploaded a balance sheet and profit and loss, and it'll generate a 2 or 3 minute script that you could like then include in a delivery video or something like that, that identifies all the major changes and things to look out for. Like when you send that over to the client. So honestly, that's something that you can do yourself right now with a bit of prompting. But in terms of products, I haven't seen it yet. Honestly, I think that's one of the harder use cases to tackle, especially as you're working with clients in specific domains, because you're working with general knowledge. And if you work with, taxidermists, and that's your specialization, kind of the unique challenges that they have. And that Bill has specifically been working on XYZ. And I'm sure there will be some AI-enabled versions that can kind of assist you with that. But I think that's one of the harder nuts to crack.
Jesse asked, what AI-powered tool for accountants do you wish existed but doesn't yet?
Oh, baby. So it's funny now Carter Gray put out a tweet a while back that said if you could have this magic AI bot that would do anything for you, what would it do? And it's a bunch of accountants, so they're coming up with all these weird random things, but the most common one was respond to all my emails, please. So the thing I'm most excited about is really good generative replies where the client asks, what's the status of my project? Well, it's right here in my practice management system. So it can generate a reply that knows that and sees that. Or give me a copy of this bank letter, or send this bank letter to a client. Well, here's 15 other bank letters that I've written that are very similar in my file system. Draft one for me that addresses what I need to address here in a similar tone and format to these other ones, right? Just the whole notion that we have to do all of this stuff from scratch. I think hopefully we're to the end of that. Now, there could be more weird stuff on the other side of this. Like, what does it look like when my AI generated email is going to my client and their AI generates an email? And, what is kind of that future timeline? I don't know. But hopefully it is more sort of prep work, almost like a really good personal assistant is kind of done for you.
I'm using a tool called Grammarly. Helps me clean up all of my sentences and make them, nice and MLA formatted or whatever. And they have a plugin for Chrome, and just every email I write now, I'll run it through that. I mean, it just automatically, makes suggestions. It has the ability to like read the email and then draft a reply. But so far, I've found the replies to be extremely, what's the word? It's like super formal and professional sounding, and it doesn't sound like me, maybe because I'm just very unprofessional. But even if I have to constantly remind it to like simplify this, make it more direct, sound less fluffy. So it's not quite that one. I haven't, felt quite good using yet, but I also use Jasper. I don't know if you've used used that one, and they have a plugin as well, and you can just highlight text and say, improve this. And that one I find to be actually really good. So if it'll keep my tone, but just make it sound better somehow.
Yeah. So it all comes down to the implementation. I mean, a tool that has access to every email that you've ever sent, it ought to be able to mimic your tone, right? Like a really good implementation of that, even down to the client specific level. I have clients who I'm super formal with. I have clients who are grandmas. I have clients who I use a lot of obscene language with. And like, it could even like down to that level of granularity, like identify here's your normal tone, but also here's what your past communications with this specific client look like.
Yeah.
And it can spice it up accordingly.
I'm looking forward to that. And that's the block we have right now, is that these tools just don't have access to all of that context. So if you're frustrated and you've been trying to use these tools and you're listening and you're saying, I don't know about this. I think that's when we'll have the next big breakthrough. And it's got to be Microsoft that does this.
I mean, it's just a matter. I mean, it's just a matter of time before it trickles down to everybody, in my opinion. They may. So what's the reason why I wouldn't jump ship tomorrow and just throw everything I have on my firm on Microsoft Copilot? For me, they may roll that out and it may be super compelling. And the day that it launches, it may be the best, most well-connected sort of platform there is. But ultimately, they're only going to solve the general problems. And this is where like the tools specific to our space become more and more valuable, because the ceiling of what they can do for us is much higher because they solve accountant specific problems, from integrating into the other tools in my accounting suite and like understanding more of the nuts and bolts of how we work. Microsoft's implementation is going to be super powerful, but even stuff like generative emails, like you could go down the list of examples of new novel things that then get built into everything else. I'm really excited for, stuff like how Financial Sense puts that through a very, accounting specific lens. And like there is functionality there that's just wouldn't make sense for a general user, on Office 365 or something.
Well, I hope Financial Sense product people are here listening, or if they're not listening to us live, we're going to take this interview and run it through a summarization tool, because you got to build what Jason was just talking about, which is when that email comes in, don't just respond to that one email. Look at all the history with the client, figure out what's the appropriate tone. And if the client is asking about the status of a project that you're working on, tax return or whatever, go pull that info from the project management side. Yeah.
And to their credit, I mean, you even called out AI stuff that Financial Sense has shipped. And like, we're here having the conversation and like, this is how this stuff starts and how we refine that stuff into like, what are the most meaningful features to implement.
It's a very exciting future. If anyone else has any more questions for Jason, we got a few minutes left. He's here. His time is valuable. Take advantage of it. Jason, what's the best way for accountants to stay updated with the latest advancements in AI tech?
What a tee up, Blake. I appreciate that. I've got a YouTube channel. We publish videos every week. I've done a whole series on ChatGPT, stuff like that, just kind of keeping you plugged into the latest and greatest. And then I have a daily podcast called Jason Daily, where we talk about AI stuff, but more bigger picture, all the things that just go into running accounting firms and a lot of the kind of rabbit holes and squishy things that are hard to solve for and all that.
And that's a great show, because if AI news does break, you can jump on it right the next day. Yeah. And so I always look forward to seeing that pop up in my YouTube playlist.
Yeah, I can really confidently say like the people who are plugging into that stuff like are genuinely kind of the most like ahead of the curve on AI adoption. And like the big thing for us as accountants is like, we just can't be surprised. Like you got to know what's out there. Doesn't mean that we won't have to change. You just don't want to be surprised by it, right?
That's right. Maureen asks, could you explain the privacy setting feature? Are you saying turning off the privacy setting allows the app to retain the data entered, or turning the setting on doesn't save your data? This is going back to that ChatGPT setting, I think.
On ChatGPT, I think you turn it on and it no longer does conversational history. And so that data isn't retained. On the back end, OpenAI does retain your prompts. It doesn't train them on the model, but it does retain your prompts for 30 days for safety reasons, to basically catch people who are abusing it, doing unseemly things with it. But that's pretty standard practice. Microsoft's policy for the same thing is like 6 months. If you deleted your Office 365 account tomorrow, that stuff's retained. But to keep it from being trained into the model, yes, I believe under settings, there's a private option. You turn that on, you'll notice all the conversational history on the side goes away, and that stuff isn't trained into the model.
Moshi says, what's the best use case with AI to help train tax professionals who need lots of tax training?
One cool use case right now is generating fake source documents and even email interactions with clients. So you can build out kind of these sample files for people to
like
train
that.
and learn, stuff like that. It's pretty good at generating that kind of stuff.
Dummy data. Yeah, stuff to practice with. Or that's fantastic. It's great as an educational tool just in general. Like for me, whenever I have questions about the world, the first place I go is ChatGPT, like to learn how to do something. Like, how do I improve my swim strokes? Like, you can do YouTube and you can do ChatGPT, and they both work great.
Yeah, if you think of the number of hours you wasted as a junior fumbling through, like being afraid to ask a question and not knowing where to go, like there's a lot of opportunity there.
It can at least guide you right to the right spot.
Yeah.
And that relates to this question from an anonymous attendee. Will a tax research / accounting chatbot actually work? How can we ever trust the answers?
Same way you trust the answers right now. Its job is to faster bring to your attention the most relevant excerpts from the most relevant documents so that you can form your own answer. So you're absolutely right. I don't want AI's answer. I want my own answer. But what AI can do is, in a much more efficient manner, give me all the most relevant bits to form that answer, build a work paper for me, all that. And it's literally excerpts from the source material.
Susan says on LinkedIn, I've been using ChatGPT as an assistant for my marketing with content topic suggestions and creation, which has cut the amount of time I'm spending on it in half. Also using it to build my website. This leaves me more time to do the actual bookkeeping tasks that I am not ready to turn over to an assistant.
Super good at ideation. If you're stuck on something, it can help you kind of grease the skids there.
Casey says, in the future, if AI can see into your different databases / context sources, does the actual underlying application become less relevant / distinct? Like the project management tool, the tax tool?
Yeah. So what if everything consolidates to chat? And there's a lot of smart people that say that we're at peak UI. You're never going to have as many buttons and all that stuff as you used to have. Things will get simplified down to natural language over chat or over voice. And for many things, man, that seems awful. That seems like when they made us stop having physical keyboards on cell phones and made us start using touch keyboards, right? But yes, if everything gets consolidated to chat, then you still need all that information to kind of live in a common place behind the scenes. I will say right now, it's hard to imagine a lot of things that we do like going to chat, but we'll see.
A good example is you can now book flights using Kayak and the Kayak plugin in ChatGPT. And I honestly do not find that conversational experience to be better than searching for flights and seeing a big table of flights.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's probably gonna be some stuff that's suited for it and some stuff that isn't. A lot of it right now, I think they're still figuring out what is the most useful implementation of this. Like, how much does it really need to show you? Is it even different depending on the context? Stuff that you can get done when your hands are tied. I know we all love podcasts. One of the great things about being able to listen to Blake's podcast, I can do it when I'm mowing the lawn or washing the dog or something like that. So is there even a version of that where it's like, well, my hands are tied, but I can still be somewhat productive via this alternative means?
We're almost out of time. So before we go, I want to highlight Workflow Con. Jason will be speaking. Do register. It's October 24th and 25th. It's a virtual event, so you can attend from anywhere. And it's all about streamlining and maximizing your accounting workflows so you can get work done. The same kind of stuff we're talking about here, but in even more detail. So register for that and sign up for Jason's newsletter. Where can people sign up for that, Jason?
You can find my newsletter at newsletter.jason.cpa.
Newsletter.jason.cpa. That's easy.
Yep. Goes out every Thursday.
All right. Thanks everyone for attending. Hope to see you again for our next Grow and Scale webinar next month. Bye, Jason.
See you guys.